Well, the ban on importing handguns will take effect in 2 weeks. The government says it's going to temporarily use regulations to put that ban into effect until the permanent ban legislation passes through Parliament. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly says a recent uptick in handgun sales prompted them to act.
As Canada's Foreign Minister, I have the authority to deny any export or import permit application that is contrary to Canada's security. When making these decisions, I always keep Canadian interests, safety and security top of mind.
CBC's Janice McGregor is covering this announcement for us today. So Janice, walk us through what the government is doing here.
Well, they're taking advantage of powers that actually rest with Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly. Handguns are now going to be put on the import control list. That falls under the Export and Import Permits Act, meaning that you're not going to be able to bring a handgun into this country unless you have a certain type of permit. Even though previously handguns were always restricted in terms of their legal ownership, you didn't actually need a permit to import one into Canada. Joly said from now on, she is going to be denying any permits for handguns for individuals or for stores, for vendors that wanted to purchase them. That is basically how they're going to shut imports down. It takes effect 2 weeks from today, August 19th. That's the earliest, she said, that they were able to do this while still respecting due process. And they're calling it a temporary ban because they're only going to use this tool of Joly's until they get the legislation passed to bring in kind of the permanent freeze on the handgun market in this country. It was necessary now, though, Joly said today, because since the government introduced its legislation on a handgun freeze back in May, they had actually seen an uptick in sales of handguns in this country. And of course, having a run on the market, that is really counterproductive to the government's overall goal of wanting to cap handgun numbers in this country. So they had taken a different approach here from the one they took back in 2020 when they brought in a ban on what they called military-style assault rifles. Then the ban was announced, and right away, you couldn't buy one, you couldn't sell one, it was shut down. Here they've had this gap of several months and counting since they made their intentions known last May. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino today said there have been between 45 and 55,000 registrations for new handguns a year, and they really need to reverse that trend.
Okay, you also talked, Janice, about the legislation sort of inspiring all this, Bill C-21. What is the status of that legislation?
Of course, it's still working its way through the parliamentary process. It had its vote at second reading right before Parliament rose for the summer. So now it is kind of off to committee. We know that the NDP and the Bloc Québécois are broadly supportive of it. So it is going to pass probably this minority parliament sooner or later. But of course, the Conservatives kind of vocal in their opposition. So it is hard to say how long it might take to grind through committee, get through all the stages, go through the Senate, and so on. In the meantime, this was something that Cabinet could do using another minister's powers, and they were complimenting each other on their resourcefulness and creativity in getting this done today.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. CBC's Janice McGregor. Well, for more on this story, Marco Mendicino is Minister of Public Safety. He's in Toronto. Minister, your gun legislation has not been passed in Parliament. It's not the law of the land, but now you are unilaterally banning the import of handguns. Obviously, that's no small thing. I want to know why you think it's okay to do that without Parliament's approval.
Because almost like clockwork every year, we see shootings and tragedies spike every summer. I used to work on the front lines of the criminal justice system. You could almost set it to your watch. And the status quo is not acceptable. I mean, I think it's easy to sometimes give really short shrift and to gloss over the fact that human lives are at stake every single day in communities right across the country. And therefore, we've got to act. So you're right. We've taken a very concrete decision by introducing a ban on the further importation of handguns. The idea is that we will continue to press forward without any hesitation to pass Bill C-21, which of course includes the national handgun freeze. I'm going to continue to work with parliamentarians of all political stripes so that we can get that done. But it has to be seen in the broader context of a comprehensive strategy that means putting into place smart, sensible laws like C-21, investing to stop illegal trafficking at the border, and addressing gun violence at its root causes, which we're doing by rolling out a $250 million building communities, safer community strategy. So tough problem, complex problem. And that's why we've got to keep pushing forward and keep acting.
You make the point about this being like clockwork. MPs of all the other parties are aware of that too, right? They have the same information you do about what happens every year. So I just want to ask again, because this is such a big move you're making, why not take the time that it will take to get all of the necessary political support for this, rather than doing it on your own?
The short answer is because we're continuing to see innocent lives lost. There were 3 more shootings in the last number of days in Montreal, where I was just yesterday to deliver $40 million to the province of Quebec, who will distribute it across municipalities, including Rivière de Prairie, where we were yesterday with Minister Rodriguez, to prevent gun crime from occurring in the first place by, again, looking at reducing barriers, giving young people who are at particular risk of being exposed to criminal elements, organized crime, and guns. And as a result of the jeopardy and the ongoing consequences that people face, again, on a very real and raw level. Catherine, I cannot sufficiently convey to you the raw conversations that I have with people who've been profoundly impacted by gun violence, whether through the loss of a loved one or by being injured themselves, how urgent the situation is. So yes, we took a decisive decision. We added another protection. We added another measure that will accelerate our comprehensive strategy and agenda to save lives. That is the goal here, is to save lives, and we'll keep pushing forward.
Okay, you talk about the urgency and your stated goal here. So just help me understand this in terms of the timing. When you actually introduced your legislation back in May, there was a surge in handgun purchases. There are all sorts of different measures that reflect that. Why didn't you just do this then? Why did you not, to some extent, let the horse out of the barn? There are so many more guns, presumably in circulation now, from the moment that you announced your legislation to going ahead and making this move.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's one of the reasons why, in addition to tabling C-21, we also tabled changes to the regulations under the Firearms Act, which would bring the import and the effect of the national handgun freeze more quickly into place. And we were making some very solid headway with the NDP and with the Bloc Québécois. There was, in fact, a motion that had been put forward to the Standing Committee on Public Safety. The only ones that blocked it were, of course, the Conservatives, who seem to be advocating not only for the status quo, but have committed in the past to pulling back and really retracting from a lot of the policies that we put into place that we believe save lives. And so what we did was we went back to the drawing board. I reached out to colleagues across government. We worked with Minister Joly and Global Affairs, and we put in place now this importing ban.
With respect, Minister, just a moment there. With respect, surely you knew that the Conservatives would not be on side with this legislation. So I'm not sure that I understand, if indeed you feel this is necessary, why you didn't do it months ago before there was a surge in sales.
Look, I readily concede that there is urgency to this matter, and we've been very innovative and creative. This is not necessarily an intuitive legal measure that we have come up with. It is something that is unprecedented, and it shows the lengths to which we're going to leave and exhaust all options when it comes to saving lives. And so I am grateful to Global Affairs and to Minister Joly for exercising her ministerial authorities to accelerate the progress that we want to make on this important agenda. And we'll continue to push forward with C-21, working and reaching across partisan lines where we can, because this is an issue that touches every single community. And there is a very strong correlation in the explosion of the handgun universe and the increase in handgun crime. And that's why, again, we'll look at both conventional and non-conventional and creative options like we did today to save lives.
I want to give people a sense of how significant the surge was. The Ontario Chief Firearms Officer told iPolitics that between June 1st and June 30th, there was a 914% increase, 914% increase in handgun transfers over the same period in 2021. So you are making another move now. I want to ask you, it's 2 weeks before this comes into effect. Do you anticipate that there will be perhaps a smaller, but another surge now in sales?
Well, I concede that there might be, but that's why I'm grateful to Minister Joly for actually shrinking the amount of time when this would come into force. Typically, in exercising her authorities under the Import-Export Controls Act, you would require 30 days. We've taken it down to 14 days so that we can, again, move forward more quickly, expeditiously, to bring the effect of the national handgun freeze into full force as much as we possibly can. We're not going to stop there. We do need to take a look again at the wide frame of this, which is that we know that people are losing their lives as a result of gun violence. We know that it's a complex problem that can't be just solved by legislative authorities, that can't just be solved by investing in our borders. And I've been touring around the country to see the work of CBSA firsthand. Last year, we actually seized a record number of illegal firearms. There's more to do, and it can't just be solved by preventative strategies. We need to be doing all three of these things, and that is what we are proceeding with great energy and effort and expediency, and we'll continue to do that.
I just want to ask you one more question about the announcement today, which is I'd like you to quantify it for us, because I understand that this does not cover every handgun that's being brought into Canada. Can you give us a sense of what percentage of how sweeping this is?
Well, I'd say just first at a high level that the vast majority of handgun sales are imported. And that's because we have a very small manufacturing sector here. And so that's one of the reasons why we've turned to this particular measure. I would say that the increase of handgun violence has been dramatic over the last number of years. Last decade, we see approximately, just to give you some numbers, Catherine, about 45 to 55,000 new registrations every year. So it's easy for your viewers and all Canadians to visualize how much the universe of this type of gun, which is now the number one gun used in homicides, explode.
But I am asking you about the measure today, sir. I think people would want to understand how sweeping this is. Is this going to reduce, because there are exceptions, some people will still be able to import guns as I understand it. Is 95% to 50%? Like, can you give us a ballpark?
I'd say the vast majority. I would say the vast majority of those handgun importations will be halted and banned on a go forward as a result of these authorities. Yes, there will be some exemptions, but they are tailored to legitimate purposes like security and for law enforcement. But this will have an impact. And that means unshackling ourselves from the complacency of status quo so we can have a positive impact in reversing the trend of the growth of this particular type of gun.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you about one more element of your plan, specifically the proposals that you put forward vis-a-vis gun buybacks. You've put numbers on the table in terms of how much owners might expect to receive. And you know that some of them are very concerned that they are going to lose a significant amount of money. In some cases, I've heard people referring to the prospect of gun owners being out thousands of dollars under this buyback plan. Is that okay with you? Or can you offer reassurances to gun owners that that won't be the case? Is it okay if a law-abiding gun owner loses thousands of dollars under your plan?
Well, I would reassure anyone that lawfully purchased an assault-style rifle that's now banned as a result of the decision that we took 2 years ago, that we are going to be fair, that we are going to be transparent, that we are going to work with them, with law enforcement and industry leaders to ensure that we are able to get those guns out of our communities and off our streets, because it's the judgment of this government and the belief of the vast majority of Canadians that assault-style rifles like AR-15s that were used in the commission of some of the worst mass shootings in our country's history have no place in our communities. So we're going to be upfront with them. That's one of the reasons why we published the pricing list. We'll continue again to move forward with that element of a very broad and comprehensive strategy that has a lot of different components, Catherine. Okay. As I said, good laws, good investments at our borders, and yes, buying back assault-style rifles as well. I'm
not sure that answers my question about amounts of money, but I know you have somewhere else to be, Minister, so we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.